In this video, I'm going to be looking at how we resolve our dominant 7th tetrad to a chord 1. If you haven't watched my video on writing dominant 7th chords yet, please check that out so that you know how to do this correctly. But let's start off with a dominant 7th chord in the key of C major and have a look at how we can resolve this to a chord 1. A dominant 7th chord obviously has a lot more tension to it, so we need to be able to resolve this correctly, and it is absolutely beautiful at a cadence point. So let's start off by looking at our general cadence rules. So we know that when we write cadences, we always want to keep our root notes in the bass. That gives us a real sense of strength to those chords. Remember, we weaken chords by inverting them. So at a cadential point, we do want to keep them in root position. We always want our leading note to resolve to our tonic. That's a really important part of the resolution, is the leading note resolving to the tonic. We want to keep our common notes where we can. And this is not a rule that we generally consider with perfect cadences, but in plagal cadences, we always want the 4th degree of the scale to resolve to the 3rd. Again, that gives us a lovely sense of resolution. And with a dominant 7th tetrad, we do actually have the 4th degree of the scale. So the notes G, B, D, and F, which make up our dominant 7th, in the key of C major, contains that F, which is C, D, E, F, the 4th degree of C major. So let's follow these rules now and resolve this chord. So I'm going to keep my root notes in the bass. Nice and easy, I can put my C there. I want my leading note to resolve to a tonic. So in the key of C major, that means I want my B to resolve to a C. I need to keep my common note, but in this case, we don't have a common note. Normally, what would happen is in my dominant chord, I would have doubled the G, but I haven't doubled the G now. I've replaced it with the F, so I don't have a common note to keep. So I'm just going to write G there to remind myself that I've got to add it in somewhere. And the 4th needs to resolve to the 3rd. So in the key of C major, the 4th note is F, and that needs to resolve to an E, which is the 3rd degree of the scale. And then we've got that G left over, so let's pop it in there. So we've followed all of our rules, but we've left with a couple of problems here. The first problem is obviously the spacing in chord 1. The distance between my tenor and my alto voice is much too big. But I've also got the dreaded thing called a parallel fifth. Okay, a set of parallel fifths there. So G to D and C to G gives me a set of parallel fifths, which we want to avoid at all costs in writing 4-part harmony. So we cannot resolve a complete dominant 7th chord to a complete tonic chord and avoid parallel fifths. So we are left with 2 options. Option 1 is we can resolve the complete dominant 7th chord to an incomplete tonic. Or option 2 is we can resolve an incomplete dominant 7th to a complete tonic. So let's have a look at how we will do this. So we're going to start with option 1. So here we want a complete dominant 7th chord, and we're going to resolve it to an incomplete tonic. So I'll show you how to do that now. So let's take a look at our rules. So we want to have our root notes in the bass. So here we can have a G going to a C. Absolutely fine. We always need our leading note to resolve to the tonic, and we can do that. Let's pop that in our soprano voice, B going to C. The 4th has to resolve to the 3rd. Remember that F gives us so much more tension in our dominant 7th tetrad, so we want it to resolve properly. So our F needs to resolve to our E. And now to complete our dominant 7th chord, because remember in option 1 we want a complete dominant 7th chord where we've got G, B, and F. The missing note here is D. So now I've got a nice complete dominant 7th tetrad, G, F, D, B. And in order to avoid having those parallel fifths, I'm going to now triple the root in my tonic chord. So I'm going to add another C in here. So what we have to do here is triple the root and leave out the fifth in our tonic triad in order to create a beautiful resolution. And have a listen to how lovely this sounds. All right, so just a quick note. Remember, if you have to leave a note out of a chord, remember the tonic is obviously, or the root note is the most important note. That note gives the chord its name. Okay, so this is a C major chord, and so we cannot leave out the root. And the third gives that chord its identity. It says, is it major or is it minor? So we cannot leave out the third. But the fifth can be expendable. So in this case, we've had to triple the root and leave out the fifth in order to avoid parallel fifths. So let's have a look now at option 2. So this is where we resolve an incomplete dominant seventh to a complete tonic. So again, we can put our root notes in the bass. We've got our G going to our C. Our leading note must always resolve to our tonic. That's a non-negotiable. And again, our fourth has to resolve to the third. The tension of that added seventh has to resolve downwards to the third. In order to complete chord 1, which is now made up of C, C, and E, I'd need to add in a G as my other note. So now I've got a nice complete tonic chord. If I look at my dominant seventh tetrad now, I've got G, B, and F. What's missing is my fifth. And as I've just mentioned, if you're going to leave something out, generally it should be the fifth. You can't leave out the root note. That's the note that gives the chord its name. You can't leave out the third because that's the note that gives the chord the identity. Is it major or minor? And if you left out the seventh, then you would just have a normal dominant chord, and you can just have normal perfect cadence rules, and we wouldn't need to be having this discussion. So what we're going to do here is we're going to double my root in my dominant seventh chord and leave out the fifth. And that allows me to now keep my common note, which is another one of my rules. So let's have a listen to this. Again, that's a beautiful resolution of a chord full of tension to a nice complete tonic chord. So if you have a look at these two options, you'll see that you'll need to leave the fifth out of one of these chords in order to produce a good resolution, a nice solid resolution that doesn't contain any parallel fifths. So please practice writing out some perfect cadences that include dominant seventh chords because they are so beautiful to incorporate into your 4-part harmony writing.